You mentioned a couple of signals, facial signals, yeah.
Hmm.
Paul Ekman, who consulted for the TV series Lie to Me, yeah, he kind of, made micro expressions famous. Yeah? But again, micro expressions are not a indicator of a deception. It's just showing you an incongruence between what you say and
Yes.
what you really feel.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, how do you view micro expressions? Not necessarily as deception indicators, but as an expression of, let's just say, the truth leaking through.
Sure. And it's actually it's always everything's in flux as you get more data. For a long time, and I still believe in micro expressions. I think they can be extremely accurate when detecting comfort and stress. I've actually seen it live when interviewing my son. I have a great interview of my son when he was in first grade, and I caught a couple micro expressions. The challenge with micro expressions, they happen so fast. Again, you go to, if people want to put these things into practice live, you really can't because it's a 1/16th of a second. Like even with my son, here he is. I know my son inside out. He's in first grade. He's sitting on a couch in front of me, and he did a quick micro expression when I asked him about getting in trouble in school. It was a flash of a eye blink and a quick eyebrow compression. It happened boom, like this, and I missed it going live. But I looked back at the video. I was like, oh, there it is, right there. So again, they can be accurate, especially when you have data points. And that's really, I think, the crux of this. Because the other thing that people say, oh, he looked up and to the right or down to the left, he must be this. And I remember my first behavioral consult, we had the Dr. Reed Malloy, world-renowned psychologist from California. He was on our team as a consultant. I remember all we had was a video of the individual that we were trying to assess. And I remember this guy, all we had was eye movements. And I even said to him, I said, hey, let's start recording eye movements. And we had 4 hours of video to watch. And he goes, nope, we don't have enough data points.
Since you mentioned it now a couple of times, baselining, yeah. And again, I'm looking at this through the lens of negotiations, business negotiations. But again, negotiations are negotiations, so it could be anywhere, right?
Yeah, the relationship building. That's what negotiations are.
Also, but again, specifically context, business negotiations, you have five, six, seven managers from another company. You meet them the first, second, third time. You do exactly that baselining, right? But then in my view, yeah, baselining in a neutral situation and then comparing it with a high stress, well, it can be a high stress situation, is comparing apples with pears, right? Because the signals are different, right? So I find baselining really, really challenging because there's a difference in how they behave once the stress goes up. So how do you kind of mediate between those, out of balance signals that you're getting, even though you do baseline?
I still believe that baselining is always the same because you're always going to see deviations. And if all you're ever doing is negotiation and everyone's always coming in the boardroom and all you ever is a high stress environment with an individual, that's going to be that baseline. It's either going to get better or worse, depending on what you're talking about. And if it doesn't change, that means it hasn't changed. It means their emotions and feelings towards you haven't changed. So it really comes down to you thinking before you go into that negotiation, what am I looking for? What behavioral response am I going for when I get in here? Are you looking to increase their stress because you want to put pressure on them? Are you looking to reduce that stress so they can think more cognitively? Are you looking for them to walk out of that room and think afterwards about what to do? Do you want to make a decision on the spot? So all these things need to be considered before you go in that room so you can actually strategize, what am I going for before I press for X? Do I want them to make that decision under stress? Do I want to make it undercover, or don't I care at all? So I think just it's making it very thoughtful before you engage, which is a great negotiator. Is what they do, is they know what they're looking for, they know what the outcome is, and as they're progressing through the interview interaction, which is extremely dynamic, you're just constantly reading, and adjusting yourself to what the other person's saying. Because I think one of the challenges that a lot of negotiators have is themselves, and that is they'll script themselves out of paying attention to what is being told to them, and being both verbally and non-verbally. So you got to be really, really watchful of over scripting yourself, because every time you're thinking about what you're going to say, you're missing what they're saying, because the science on this is extremely solid as
Yeah.
well. human beings, no matter what generation, even though the millennials and the wires will tell you they can multitask,
No,
no, they can't.
no, no.
So that's why I really focus one thing at a time on the other person.
Language tells us more, can tell us more than both as a nonverbal communication, because people do believe they have control over their words, but in reality they don't. And we have scientific evidence to prove it, right? So that's a very interesting thing. The only thing what I want to say or to ask about for you, because I saw in your book, I wasn't able to read it completely, but I think chapter 7 is about language. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's on my list. So I would like to get your view on language as a means of not necessarily deception detection, but also, but what else can you deduct from language?
So language, as I put it in the book, and I've said it a little bit already, is really the cornerstone for me for building trust and forging relationships and understanding where the other person's focus is, as well as their own self-awareness. And so what I'm always looking for in language and try to demonstrate as well is make sure that the other person's brain is positively engaging them for engaging with us. Again, providing that psychological comfort. And I love evolutionary psychology. We've had a couple evolutionary psychologists come to our team about their findings, and I love that stuff is because it becomes extremely predictable. Because again, all human beings are going to act in their own best interest in terms of their safety, security, and prosperity for themselves and those they care about. As long as you know what that person thinks that is, you now know what they're going to do. If you provide that psychological comfort through language, you're going to start forging trust and forging a relationship.
So I have a last question in regards to deception detection, right? There are many books who claim we lie like 20 times a day or 20 times an hour or 200 times a day. You know, they're vastly diverging numbers. Yeah? My own research and a plethora of other research shows that people actually do not like to lie, at least not outright lies. They are using deceptive strategies to circumvent lies, right? So for you, as with 20 years of FBI experience, what's your view in this regard?
I'm with you on this as well. I think people do not like to lie. They'll avoid lying at all costs, and that's why they use things like word bridging and word modifiers to try to get around lying, deceiving. People don't like doing it. It's incongruent with us because and here's why. We want to feel connected. We want to be valued. We want to belong to meaningful groups and organizations. We know genetically and biologically, intrinsically, that if we are going to be deceptive, we're going to look manipulative, and no one's going to want to be our friend. And so we're going to try to avoid doing it. And we're at an internal battle on this because at the same time, we don't want to look like we're less than someone else. So we don't want to, have a skill set that's not as good as someone else because of our own insecurities. So there's this constant internal battle where we don't want to be deceptive, we don't want to lie, but we also don't want to be thought less of because we want to belong. So it's a fascinating internal struggle. That's why I'm always looking at how open is someone, how transparent are they? Because generally, if there's someone's like that and they have competence, most likely, I'm gonna go that they're truthful most of the time. And